Aliza and I recently took the ultimate Southern California food road trip, visiting restaurants, breweries, ice cream shops, and farms from San Diego to the San Gabriel Valley in Los Angeles County. You can find these very fun episodes in the This Is Taste feed, and we can't think of a better time to support these restaurants. Thanks to our friends at Visit California for supporting this epic journey. Visit www.visitcalifornia.com to plan the perfect getaway to California, the ultimate playground.
The one thing I made a promise to myself was that I wasn't going to do any purely Western food on the show. What's the point of going to Korea and making a beurre blanc or, making a roux? I wanted to do things that related to my Korean journey.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. Chef Edward Lee is a good friend of mine and one of the most respected voices in American cooking. He's also one of the stars of the breakout Netflix cooking competition show, Culinary Class Wars. I'm sure you've checked it out. It's earned millions of fans for its unique approach at cooking competition on TV. On this episode, we hear all about the production and how Edward prepared for it, in his hotel room. It's a pretty amazing little conversation there. We also talk about his new Washington, D.C. restaurant, Shia, and go back to his time cooking in New York City in the 1990s and the pioneering restaurant he ran called Clay. It's so great catching up with Edward, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Edward Lee, welcome. This is Taste. Great to see you, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you doing?
Yo, I'm great. I can't believe we've never done a podcast. I've known you for a long time, and
I don't do a lot of podcasts.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I feel blessed then. I mean, you really I just really love your work, and we are friends. We've traveled to Vietnam and Korea, and I've been to Louisville to your house. We're buddies, so this is going to be fun to catch up with you. I really want to start with that thing we did for NBC with Audrina Patridge, who I fucking love. I love her so much. She's really nice and really smart. Take me back to we were in like Gangwon-do. What was that trip like for you?
It was great. Gosh, that was so long ago.
I know.
I can't even remember. That was one of the first, I guess, like video shoots I've ever done in Korea. So that was pretty cool. It was like really the first time. I haven't been to Korea a lot in my adult life. So that kind of started, in some ways, I guess it started sort of this reconnection with Korea. And doing it with a reality star is pretty funny.
Yeah, she was game. I mean, we went to Sokju up in Gangwon-do, and I recall it was like late October, and you're like getting the wetsuit on, diving in with the hanyo, and this was like I think 2016, 2015 maybe. So like the hanyo, which I love the hanyo, and that's like a really cool story, but like I feel like that was like one of the first times I've seen like hanyo like recorded, and you went and diving with them. It was really cool.
No, and they're crazy. I mean, I thought I was gonna drown, and you don't know when you're down there because it's the pressure and the cold, the water and the currents and everything. I thought I was down there for like 3 minutes, and my lungs were on fire, and I came up and I was down for like 40 seconds. It's totally different out there in the wild.
Yeah, and this like water that's in the 50s, and these are working women were in their probably 60s. Some of them.
Oh yeah, easily.
Did you remember when we went to that farm and there were like persimmons on the trees, and we had those women were making kimchi. It was Kim Jong season, and they were like using the kiddie pools. Those women were badass.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. Yeah, and it's I've been obviously frequenting Korea ever since. So it's been a really cool journey.
Yeah, I wanted to segue to that, and I saw you, I think this summer, and you had been going back and forth quite a bit to film Culinary Class Wars. And Edward, I mean, major congrats on the show. It's amazing. It's really, really real and really fun and has a real shine of a Korean production. So tell us a little bit about what that was like, filming with the 100 competitors, 20 chefs, and 80, commoners. What was that like?
It was insane. It was definitely the biggest production I've ever been on by far. I think at some point there were like over 200 cameras, recording everything. So just an insane amount of production, and just like an entire army of crew. And it's funny. I don't know, just being in that environment, like whatever. I've done cooking shows before, but I really like, I don't know if what you say retired, but I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't do it because I get invited all the time to do these cooking shows, and I sort of made a promise that I wouldn't do it again. And also, I'm older, and there's just not much interest in it for me. So I really haven't done anything like that in probably, gosh, 15 years. And they called, and at first I was like, I don't know if I want to do this because I'm just not into the competition thing. But the more I talked to them, and it was the first big production in Korea with a Korean production company featuring Korean chefs, featuring Korean food. I just felt like it was important to be involved in something like that. And I don't know if any of us really thought it was going to take off the way it did. I mean, we it was a beautiful production, and it was really, really competitive, and you know um I don't know, it felt different when I was doing it from anything I've ever done before. And it was really grueling. And because like with all these things, you film it and you come back home, and everyone kind of resumed their life. And I got to meet some really fun chefs in Korea, and got to make some new friends. And I thought that was cool. And I don't know, we just like time goes, because it was at least a good 6-7 months before they edit and put it on air, and you kind of almost forget about it. And then I was like, oh yeah, that show that I did is coming. And I remember even texting some people about it, because I thought, well, no one's gonna see this, so let me make sure that people know that it's on. And then it started out a little slow, and then I guess by the second week it just started to take off, and I don't know, it's just exploded overnight. And it's just been a nonstop roller coaster ever since. So it's been great.
I mean, it's a real testament to the production, and clearly there was Netflix made an investment in kind of doing culinary competition in a fresh way. That
Mhm.
scale is really the largest scale I've ever seen in like a real
Yeah.
way. I want to ask you, I recognize the difficulty of your position because you're competing in Korea. You certainly can speak Korean, but you're not native, like you don't live there and speak it all the time. So you've got to deal with the language barrier. You also have to deal with these chefs who are throwing incredible spins, using Korean ingredients, using the jangs, using kim, using all these cool things, but also bringing in a lot of Western influence. And honestly, man, you're like, it's gotta be just a real puzzle to, like, jump into the arena and cook with Koreans, like, in that way.
Yeah, it was not easy. It was, dude, that was is an understatement of the century. It was really tough. Um, I don't know, man. I went in there, and I think with these things, you just have to buy in. And I think in some ways it was really right, because so a lot of people saying it was kind of a disadvantage to me because I didn't speak the language. I don't live there. I didn't have like all my equipment. I was jet like all that stuff, and there were clearly disadvantages. But in some ways, there was this real advantage to just like being alone. Because we didn't film in Seoul, so I wasn't even in Seoul, and I just when we had days off, I was just by myself and just exploring and doing a lot of reading and cooking and going to the market every day. And so I just had all this time to myself without any distractions of family or work or anything. And I just got into a really weird space in my head, but a good one, where I was just like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And a part of it really was to figure out how to connect back to my Korean roots. Um, I don't think a lot of people in their 50s get to sort of have a second chance at going back home and feeling some kind of, uh, connection to your roots. And I felt really fortunate that I had this opportunity. So I didn't want to take it lightly. And I just said, listen, if I'm going to do this, let's just do it and focus on it. And I turned my hotel room into a a little like test lab kitchen, which
Yeah,
was really
nice.
funny. And I would just go to the market every day and just cook in my hotel room.
That's
Uh,
incredible. You had like a hot plate and you were just like ripping
a
it.
hot plate, say, what are you eating? And, I had a cutting board and a knife, a hot plate in the fridge,
So cool.
and little bowls and mixers, and just started making stuff. And it was really the one thing I made a promise to myself was that I wasn't going to do any like purely Western food on the show. Like I wasn't, I've been cooking for 30 years. I got a million recipes in my back pocket, and I said, what's the point of going to Korea and making a beurre blanc, or making a roux, or making I didn't see the point of it. So I kind of went there and said, I'm only going to cook food that kind of hits me in that moment, and stuff that I've never really done before. I mean, some things you always have in your back pocket, but like I wanted to do things that related to my Korean journey, and not sort of rely on stuff that I've learned in the past. And so that was something that was I put that extra sort of challenge on myself. And in some ways, it was really refreshing because I didn't allow myself to, you know, reach back and make a make a salad, or make a dish that I've done before. Make a pasta, or make a risotto, or like I didn't want to. Um, I don't know. I wanted to explore something new.
Yeah, I mean, you took advantage of the opportunity to have that lab in your hotel room, and and
Yeah,
and,
and
and
I wanted to work with Korean flavors. Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that was like I'm in Korea. Why would I make American food in Korea?
Yeah, what are you finding at the market? Like, are you like what are you discovering? I mean, are you thinking like, is this produce? Is it like like are you using like fermented sauces?
I mean, yeah, I mean everything that you would find. I mean, stuff that it's just different. Like there's this wonderful tangerine vinegar from Jeju Island, um, that I just fell in love with. Obviously, the produce that you get there that you can't get here. Like things like chrysanthemum leaves and minari, and all these wonderful different herbs that, and you can find some of it here, but it's just so much different over there.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously like persimmons and all the stuff that are very Korean, and stuff that I've had before my whole life, but I kind of wanted to look at them in just a different way, and see if I could use them in a way that wasn't so typical. and kind of put a fresh spin on things. So
Yeah, well, listeners, you gotta check out the show. You'll burn through all the episodes in a day. It's a binge watch. Are you thinking season 2?
like going on there.
Yeah, going back. Would you go back to the
No,
arena?
I don't. I mean,
No,
now.
it sounds like a no. I mean, we'll get to
Yeah, I
all.
mean, there's other things I need to get done,
Yeah,
and
no doubt.
I think it was whatever. Uh, it was a good run. I think that first season was really special. It was special for me, and I feel like it was special for people that were watching it. And there's a lot to be said for don't ruin a good thing.
No doubt, and really, you did really well too. I'm no spoilers, but Ed, you went really far, and congrats. Okay, I want to go back pretty far because I don't think we talk about your restaurant in New York called Clay. You opened it in 1998. And, for those familiar with your work, we know you from Top Chef. We know you from Mind of a Chef and all the television. We know you from your restaurants in Louisville and DC. But we don't really talk about this restaurant. So for our listeners, take us back to your restaurant in 98, cooking modern Korean food decade or more before this cuisine really started to percolate in New
Oh,
York.
you mean like like Clay in New York?
Yeah, let's go back to the Clay days, man. I want to give that restaurant.
Brain doesn't go back that far.
I know. Okay, dig deep. Take it. Like, my question is this: take us back to like that first opening menu or the opening couple months. What are you doing in New York in '98? And like, what are some of the dishes that I would say probably were the first modern Korean dishes being prepared in New York in that way?
I still remember it was Mott Street and Spring Street. We had the restaurant, and it just it came. It's serendipity. I was walking by, and the rent was so cheap that I was like, I knew I wasn't ready to open a restaurant, but I was like, I'm never gonna get this deal ever again. And so I jumped in and did. I was 25 when the restaurant opened, and I was pretty green, but I wanted to. I had this idea that Korean food back then was so new, and I was probably actually ahead of my time. Like, it was like too much,
100%.
because Korean food hadn't really even quite been like the traditional part of it hadn't quite even been established. And so then I just kind of like was almost jumping too far ahead and doing kind of a modern view of it. And I remember the whole idea was to take all of these Korean foods and make it into smaller portions and modernize it and do like Korean tapa style. So that, because the one thing I hate about traditional Korean restaurants is you go and you have to order like huge plates of meat. And like you order pajeon and it's like 18 slices. And so you don't get to try a huge variety of things because everything you order is in big portions. So I said, well, why wouldn't you make a small portion so people could taste around and order like 8 or 9 things, and you could really learn about Korean food and taste the whole, wide range of it. And it was wildly successful. I mean, like beyond my imagination. We just did really well. And it was so funny because I didn't know anything about the restaurant business then. We didn't have a credit card machine for like 8 months.
Wow.
So I was just doing like, we just didn't really know about the restaurant business. And at that time, I don't know, for anyone out there who's like true New Yorker, the only Korean restaurant outside of Koreatown was this place called Doc Suni's. And it was kind of the first Korean restaurant. It was on First Avenue, maybe 4th Street
Yep.
and First Avenue.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it was like the first, I don't know, hipster maybe. Like, it was the first Korean restaurant that really went outside of the norm. And you had like customers that were from all walks of life, and they were doing pretty straight up traditional Korean food. And I just thought like, wow, that's really cool. And then and they had a great following. And so I was like, I love that. And I just wanted to take that vibe But just bring it a little bit more, I hate to use the word fusion, but just like give it a little bit more cross-cultural reference, and be a little more playful with the food. And we had a great run, and it's really funny because we did that for what, 3 years. I paid off all my debt in 3 years, and I was just starting to make money, and by then I was like, what, 28, 29, and everything was going swimmingly well. And then 9/11 happened,
Yeah.
and that was, where I was. I mean, it's a very short walk to the Twin Towers from where I was, and that was kind of the crushing blow that just rejiggered my life, because I didn't really want to stay in New York after. I'm born and bred in New York. Like spent my entire life in New York, and I just didn't want to stay in New York anymore. Um, and I don't know, this weird, friend of a friend of a friend opportunity came up, and I ended up going to
Yeah,
Kentucky.
you bounced to Kentucky. I want to get to that part, but like back to
Yeah,
Daksuni. I love that you
yeah,
mentioned that it's in the back cover of book Koreatown, and we
yeah,
have a
yeah.
little memory of it. And I love that reference. And they put out a cookbook too in like maybe
They did, they
'95.
did.
It's a real pioneering work, and I used it and love that book. But I mean, the idea of like making Korean food, quote unquote, hip or cool or hipster, that was an impulse that I would say 20 years later, more than 20 years later, is now, I mean, it is the coolest cuisine in New York. And
Mhm,
I say that
mhm,
with like a real, like no irony. It's
mhm.
truly it's really setting the level in New York dining and really like when you're downtown in Soho doing Korean food, are you getting a clientele that are, like, not familiar with Korean food? And, like, does that echo kind of this time we're in now, which Korean food is being introduced to so many people who've honestly never had, like, anything outside of bibimbap? I mean, were you kinda
Right,
doing
yeah.
that?
Yeah, I guess we were. You mean at my restaurant?
Yeah, Clay,
Yeah, no, we were. I mean, I'd say more than 50% of the clientele, uh, that we were serving to had never had Korean food. And so we
wow.
were I was and the way I saw it was like, if I make this a little more palatable, a little bit more of a gateway, look, if I make it a little bit more accessible. And a lot of it is just like, even just menu, like making the menu more readable, making it less, instead of having 60 items on a menu, having 20 items, having people that can explain the food, that it would draw more attention, and people. So a lot of things, what happened was like, people were like, oh yeah, yeah, I've never been to a Korean restaurant, because it just seems so daunting. So they would come to my restaurant and they go, I really love the food. I go, great, now go to 32nd Street
Right.
and you can go have something more
Go up to
authentic.
Kangsu, remember Kangsu?
Yeah, yeah.
Kangsu,
And
that
so a lot of people ended up coming to my restaurant, and then from that got turned on to Korean food, and then went to more authentic places and became real fans of Korean food.
yeah.
And I thought that was cool, because it was like, I just, whatever I wanted. It's not like I wanted, to like turn my customers away, but I wanted to have more people be introduced to Korean food, because at the time Korean food was not trendy or popular at all. And again, outside of Doc Suni, I mean, we'll just say it, like, there wasn't Korean restaurants for white people. Outside of Doc Suni and my restaurant was it. And at the time, most restaurants in Koreatown, they weren't the friendliest to outsiders, like they didn't speak English. They didn't really care if you came or not. So it was a bit of a struggle. And it takes a while to sort of bridge these things together, so that you can have a cuisine that becomes, globally, or at least nationwide, successful. Someone said to me, recently, and I never think about these things, but someone recently, uh, said in an email, they were like, "Well, you should do something because you're kind of like one of the forefathers of Korean food in New York." And I never thought of it, because I left New York, so I left the whole New York scene. I left that behind, and I never thought of it that way, because I never thought I did anything very, relevant, or gastronomically, important. I had a small restaurant for 3.5 years, um, and then it got crushed by 9/11. So it is, and it wasn't because it was this is before social media.
Yeah.
I mean, this is before any of that. So it wasn't like there wasn't a trail. I mean, you Google my restaurant, Clay, and there's nothing online.
Edward, it's
Literally
before
nothing.
cell phones, man. Like, let's get
It's
real.
before. I
It's before
remember getting
cell
my
phones.
first cell phone like 6 months before we closed.
Yeah.
So there was like either you knew about the place or you didn't, and we got some great, like, we were in the New York Times, we were in I mean, we were in like Japanese Vogue, like we got some great write ups, but it was still this, like, it was a world where you either knew it or you didn't, and it's really funny, like, so what, 20, almost 30 years later, I still have people come up to me or social media message me or write me and say, "I remember Clay. That place was a fucking legend."
Yeah.
And we had a great time, and we probably partied a little more than we should have,
I
but I
mean,
was
it's
also
Soho in the '90s. I mean, come on, it's a
yeah,
beautiful time to be operating a restaurant,
it
being
was
a
a
chef.
beautiful time, and it was like it was just really I would never trade those 3.5 years
Yeah.
for anything. And those 3.5 years, like, the people that know that were there, that worked for me, that were regulars, they just know it was a really special restaurant, and it was like the Cheers of Nolita,
Yeah.
like, everyone came down every night, and we all hung out, and we all had Korean food, and we all drank soju, and we just hung out, and it was this grand time. And in some ways, it's like it was over, and I never wanted to rehash that. And then,
And here you are
yeah,
doing it on a podcast.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
It's like going down memory
It's
lane.
really special, and I'm so glad you shared these memories, because I agree with you fully. You are really a forefather, godfather of Korean food in New York, and that is, it is absolutely the facts. Let's transition
It
and
is,
move.
but in some way, I'm not, because it didn't, that small restaurant didn't touch enough people
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get
to
it.
to influence anyone. It was like all the people that are doing great Korean food in New York, they never ate at my restaurant, so they never saw it. And
No.
like, I think people know about it, that it existed, but it was kind of a neighborhood restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say, yeah, you're not being modest. I think you are correct in some ways, that not enough people saw you, and I think Jung Sik Yim, what he did with his restaurant in Tribeca,
Mhm,
so much talent came out of those kitchens, and we
mhm.
see that today, and really that may be the most influential, but I would say pioneer. Let's call you a pioneer. You're more
That's
of a
fine.
pioneer than Godfather. Okay, so you moved to Louisville. And you're very understated and humble, and I love talking to you about it. But like 610 Magnolia, this restaurant you opened in Louisville, uh, another pioneering restaurant in a different way, in a way that brought haute cuisine and real, like, fine dining to a city that had a lot of heritage and a lot of history. And you've written about that beautifully in your first cookbook, Smoke and Pickles, which I think is one of my favorite cookbooks of all time. Love your work there. And just for our listeners who maybe don't know, and this restaurant is still open, still very successful. Like, 610 is a pioneer. What was that shift like, moving there? And, like, just for the sake of the brevity, like, what does it mean to move from this restaurant in Lolita Clay to a brand new city, and doing this fine dining?
Yeah, it was, I don't know, it's a whole book, but
It is, sorry.
to put it, really short, I was really depressed when I left New York. I was like 9/11. I actually had a friend die in the towers, and I was probably needing to sober up a little bit, and so I moved to, of course, I moved to the capital of bourbon, which probably wasn't the best idea. And I didn't have any friends in Kentucky, so I don't know. I was 29, 30, and I just did this. I didn't know if I was going to stay. I really went to Kentucky to just hang out for a year, clear my head. Um, but I just, I lived alone. I lived above the restaurant. I cooked 12 hours a day, and I went to bed, and I kind of left this entire world of New York nightlife and the glitz and all this, all the the models and the fashionistas and all that. And I just left all that behind. I just went to have a very simple life and to just kind of reassess. I think Clay had been so successful, but it kind of became a party hangout, and which I loved, and it was great. But I wanted to do something more with food. Like I didn't want to run a joint for the rest of my life,
Yeah.
and I knew I wanted to get more serious about food. And I don't. It gave me a place where I could just be quiet and have no friends and just cook and explore and make mistakes, kind of under the radar. um, I didn't know if it was gonna last, and obviously, like, when we first I 610 was a restaurant that had existed for 27 years, and I bought it from this gentleman named Eddie Garber, and, it's like this really beautiful, quaint restaurant off the beaten track. No one knew I was there, and I just started cooking, and I would just open the doors, and, like, 4 people would wander in. But we were doing like $100 a head tasting menu, which back in the day in Louisville was unheard of. It just wasn't something that you did. And I just, there were nights where we had 4 customers, and I would just be in the kitchen by myself, maybe one other person cooking. And not all the food was great, but it was good enough where I was pushing myself and challenging myself, and it slowly caught on. And but it took a while. It was like it wasn't an overnight success, and people were very skeptical of who I was and where I came from and why I was doing this weird modern food in the middle of Louisville, Kentucky. But the people there were really nice and welcoming, and they were curious, and they just, I don't know, in some weird way they accepted me. They didn't I don't think people of Kentucky realized how vulnerable and how kind of at a crossroads I was in life. And I didn't really have planned to stay, but I was just so warmly welcome, and I just fell in love with the place and the people. I met a girl who's now my wonderful wife and mother to my child, and I ended up staying for 22 years. Obviously still have restaurants there, and I love this city for what it gave me, because at the time I didn't really know who I was as a chef, and it gave me a voice, and it gave me a place and a foundation and some roots in the least likely place that you would ever think for a Korean American kid who was born in Brooklyn, just to wind up there. But I don't know. Sometimes life happens that way, and you can't close yourself off to it. And I feel really fortunate that Louisville became my home base, and it became the place where I found my voice. And I love that city to death.
Well, it's an incredible story, and definitely pick up the book Smoking Pickles for really the details and the recipes from that era. I want to push forward, and of course, you run restaurants all over the country now, and you have 2 restaurants in Louisville. But the one that really sticks out is your newest restaurant in Washington, D.C., where you live now. Shia, to me, is just another evolution in your story. I can't wait to visit. It's opened in November, so it's brand new, and you're there cooking, and it sounds like maybe some similar instincts from the early 610 days. You're there. It's a tasting menu format. Please, Ed, just tell us a little bit about this restaurant and what it means, because I think we're going to be hearing a lot about it in the next 12 months. And it really, I love the menu. I love it. I just
Oh, thank
absolutely.
you. Yeah, it's I don't know. Like, so I've been on this Korean journey, for a little bit, and it's kind of like, as we talked about, it started with taking some trips there. Obviously, I when I had my daughter's 11 now. When she was born, a decade ago or so, you just start like, oh, like, so I got this kid now. Like, am I gonna teach her about Korea? I want her to know about something, but she's not 100% Korean anyway. So you just start having these thoughts, right, when you have a kid. And I don't know, I just started like reintroducing myself to a culture that I had been born with, but haven't really embraced or put that much effort into it. My fault for doing that.
Mhm.
And so, I'm just kind of reconnecting. And then, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I opened a Korean restaurant in Louisville, Kentucky called Nami. And Nami is actually my daughter's Korean name. And so I just kind of like just wanted to do something for her and to, I don't know, to have some legacy for Korean food. And I thought, Korean food being more popular, I thought it'd be cool to do a Korean barbecue joint in Louisville, Kentucky. Anyway, it became wildly successful. And as I'm doing it, I'm just getting more and more into Korean food and just like discovering more things and getting deeper into recipes. And then things that I can't do there because it's pretty much a traditional barbecue restaurant. So we don't stray too far from sort of our DNA at the restaurant.
Like Colby, bibimbap.
Yeah, yeah. And we're very playful with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's got like pajan and bibimbap, all the classics. And I just started getting really, really like inspired by ingredients. And like any chef would go like, all right, like I've got all this perilla seed and we use it in a very traditional way at Nami. But I'm like, yeah, but what if we did this with it? And and I just started thinking about all these things. And I was like, I don't have an outlet or a restaurant to do all this in. And then the call came to do the Culinary Class Wars. And then that just got me even more completely jazzed up about like what the potential of Korean food can be. And this sort of bridging between Korean food and Korean American food and what that means. And you just start to think about the evolution of what Korean food is. And it got me thinking about this theory is like there's kind of like generations of Korean food, just like there's generations of immigrants. And so you have this first generation of Korean restaurants in America, which is pretty much your first wave of immigrants. It's your mom and pop Korean restaurants. It's your K-Town restaurants. In LA, you go to Koreatown. It's, your kalbi, your barbecue grill, your pajan, your mandu. And that's great. And that kind of lays the foundation. And then the next version of that food is when those flavors and those techniques and items start to cross-pollinate with what's around your neighborhood, right? So American culture. So, for example, you have your bulgogi tacos, right? And then you have your kimchi hot dogs, and then you have your kimchi burgers. And so you have this, again, for lack of a better word, this fusion of Korean flavors mixing with very traditional or very Americanized things. And that's great. And that kind of was, and you're a part of that. And everyone like kind of that, there was this huge wave of that, I don't know, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? Where people were putting kimchi on everything. And it's a great way to introduce those flavors. And then I think there's a third wave. And that wave is what's happening now. And it's happening, like you said, with a lot of the fine dining restaurants in Korea, where now we're going, okay, we have the traditional mom and pop restaurants. We had the cross-pollination food. Now what's next? Can we do something that actually kind of focuses the lens really, really close on Korean traditions, Korean flavors, reaching back to something that's a little bit more historic, a little bit more, based on origins and techniques, but do it in a way that's a little innovative. When we started doing Shia, we had all these ideas, and the one thing that I said that I didn't want to do was to put Korean flavors on top of French technique.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when you quote unquote elevate ethnic food, you get into this weird territory, and everyone's seen it. It's like,
such a trap. It's such a trap.
It's like miso creme brulee. I'm going to do a tandoori rub on a steak. I'm going to do a ginger macaroon. And really all you're doing is doing Western food, but sort of throwing in Asian flavors. And there's nothing wrong with that. And plenty of restaurants do it, and they do it for a reason. It's delicious, and it's fine. But what I wanted to do, and I think what a lot of fine dining Korean chefs are doing in New York and in Korea, are going, wait a second. There's stuff here. There's an entire volume of technique here already. We don't have to be insecure about it and rely on Western techniques to fuse it to make it elevated. We can just elevate what's already there. And I think that, to me, if I can put it into words, encapsulates what this third wave of Korean food that's happening right now is to say, I don't have to do a French macaroon to make a great dessert. I can rely on something that's Korean, update it and modernize it and do some, but I can use that as the root and the base. And so we do things with, we do chuk, and we do, we do kind of a kalbi. We do different kinds of kimchis and changs, and we just try and elevate that. But I don't want the food to look, feel, or taste westernized in any way.
Well, I would say, Ed, I mean, it sounds like this is the type of cuisine that is prevalent in Korea, in that middle to fine dining. And I've been to Korea a few times the past couple of years and been kind of shying away from the more classic traditional places and trying to see what the modern scene is. I wrote a piece for Food and Wine that'll be coming out in December. Now, like this is so interesting because you're rejecting this fusion, this idea that you have to like give it this vocabulary of the West to bring in diners because they need that miso creme brulee. But like we as diners understand Korean food more than ever now. And
Sure.
that's got to be part of the calculus here. And like DC, of course, has such a great Korean community who can support, and plus the international audience from the government. I got to believe that this is setting up to be a really exciting time for bringing, like, I would call it traditional modern. I know those are two.
Sure. Yeah.
Those
yeah.
are
And
weird words.
and it's always an education, because like there are things that, don't, for example, you know what ojinga is, the dried squid snack.
Yes, of course.
So it's like everyone knows ojinga. Like we all eat it. We all eat it with beer. It's like it is such a common flavor.
Seafood jerky. It's the best.
It's seafood jerky, but you don't ever eat it outside of it. And I think what I think makes Korean Americans slightly different from Koreans is that, and I write about this in Buttermilk Graffiti. It's like if you have 3 centuries of tradition on your shoulder, it's really hard to see a piece of food outside of the lane that it was invented in, right? So Koreans, when they think of ojinga, it's a bar snack that you eat late at night with beer, and but I love the flavor of it. It's like sweet and salty and funky and dehydrated, and so we take that and we dehydrate it until it's completely dry, and then we grind it up into a powder, and then we coat fish with it, but we also make like I would say kind of an XO sauce, but made with dried squid with the ojinga, and so you just get this thing where it's like, and you can see the faces on even Korean people who come in, they eat it, and they go, basically, I know that flavor, but you're putting it in a context that I have no clue why it should be there. And I'm like, do you know what that flavor is? And like, I do, but I can't place it. And I'm like, and then once I say ojinga, they're like, of course it's ojinga, but you just did it in a way that's, and I'm like, to me, I don't know, that is really fun for me to take that flavor outside of its traditional context, not make it Western, but also try and mess with it a little bit, and I don't know, that's kind of the stuff that we're doing. It's really hard, and it's not perfect right now, and I've assembled a really good team, and we're starting to do more collaboration, and we're still, we're a month old, so we're still on menu 1, and menu 1's always imperfect because it's like I didn't know who my staff, I don't, so it's like basic, entry level. But as we get more comfortable with each other and as we explore more, I think there's a lot to explore with Korean flavors where we go, okay, I know this is what you think of, but we can do it and kind of play with it.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's I'm hoping that we can do more of that as we.
It's going to be an exciting evolution. She is the restaurant. If you're in DC, let's write that name down and go there. Like book the table. Just check out Ed. His skills in the kitchen. You mentioned your writing, and Buttermilk Graffiti was your first book of essays. You have a brand new book out this year. Bourbon Land, which is terrific. Your writing is so colorful, erudite, and just hearing you speak, clearly you've got some skills with the pen. Tell me, why did bourbon, this truly American commodity, allow you to write essays about many topics outside of drinking culture, and really, what is this book's real root?
Yeah, it's like I have this like multiple personalities. Like I'm at one lane, exploring like deep Korean food, and then I'm like, but bourbon.
Right.
So I feel sometimes like I'm schizophrenic, but I do like I have these dual identities in me, and I'm just like I love Korean food, but I love Southern culture too. Obviously, being in Kentucky for 22 years, so and this is a book that started 2 years ago, published this year. But I don't know, like I've been drinking bourbon my whole life, and obviously being from Kentucky for 20 years, I've been cooking with bourbon for so long, and I felt like bourbon is having this huge, phenomenal global reach right now. It's like never been more popular. And so I was talking to my publisher, like, well, what can you say about bourbon that already hasn't been said before? And there's a plethora of wonderful books about bourbon out there. And I was like, I don't know, but I don't think bourbon's ever been approached from a chef's standpoint. It's always from like a connoisseur or an expert or a bartender. And I wanted to do a deep dive into bourbon, not ranking bourbons or talking about flavor profiles or talking about ripe figs and cinnamon stick and stuff. I don't do well with stuff like that. I wanted to tell a very personal journey, and it's kind of the whole book is about Kentucky bourbon very specifically, so it's kind of my love letter to Kentucky, and really to talk about the people that make this beautiful thing. Like I think a lot of people don't understand, because bourbon is so popular right now, that bourbon almost went away, and there was like bourbon almost went extinct. There
Hmm.
was a huge period in American history where bourbon was not making any money. Vodka was the drink of choice, and there were a handful of distilleries in Kentucky that were keeping this tradition alive, and not making any money out of it.
Yeah, I mean,
And
they
they could have
closed Stitzel
easily,
Weller. I mean, Stitzel Weller is the iconic distillery with
well,
that.
Stitzel Weller folded.
Yeah,
I mean,
folded.
that's
It
our
closed. Right,
point.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all of them closed. A lot of them closed. I mean, there's and so you just had a tradition, this American spirit that everyone was ignoring for a good chunk of the 20th century, and just to see it now, like go bazonkers. There's something about it where I'm like, I'm glad that it is, but we also have to like take a pause and appreciate the fact that if it wasn't for these really stubborn people in Kentucky who decided that they were going to continue to do this without profit, we wouldn't have this. We wouldn't have this singularly classic American spirit that has taken over the globe. And so I just think it's something that is really important to kind of take a step back and look at, and
Yeah.
part and parcel of the book, but also just fun recipes.
Hmm.
And I feel like, to me, the bourbon book is a little bit of a bridge between sort of this older bourbon culture and this newer audience that's very young, very diverse, very global, and that you know it's something that sort of bridges, in a world where everything is so divisive.
Yeah.
It's really nice to talk about something that bridges old traditional Kentucky culture with young global, hipsters and people who just, rally around bourbon. And I just think it's a really cool subject to dive deep into, for a single subject book. Um, and it's like the future of bourbon is unwritten. It's vast. And it's going to become more diverse and more global, and the fact that like I can make a Korean recipe, use bourbon as an ingredient in there, and it makes the food richer and deeper. Like I just think that's what excites me. Like I've never been a traditionalist, you know.
Mhm.
Like I'm not the guy that's like, hey, let's get grandma's recipe and recreate it and authenticate it. And I love people that do that. It's really necessary. I'm glad there are preservationists out there who keep traditions alive. But that's not what gives me goosebumps. What I love is going, all right, let's take this cool thing from here and that cool thing from here. Can we smash it together? And when it works, it's awesome.
Yeah, man. We'll pick up the book Bourbonland, and I love what you talk about. Bourbon is drunk everywhere from Upper East Side cocktail bars to like the tailgate at LSU. So like it's something that reunites our country in a divided country, and really you tap into these. Ed, on This Is Taste, we ask guests about the discerning taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid fire, fast and furious taste check. Are you ready?
No, but go ahead. I don't do rapid fire very well.
All right, let's try it. The best fruit.
Oh, the best fruit. It depends what's in season. I like melons.
All right.
Like a Korean melon, like the Korean chame.
Yeah. Oh, man.
It's very understated.
Very
but
true.
When it's ripe, it's beautiful.
The worst vegetable.
The worst vegetable. Whew. I don't like this is very controversial, but I don't like artichokes. I don't think they taste like anything.
Yeah, and the work doesn't really deliver much. Agree.
It's a lot of work.
So much
for
work.
very little flavor.
So much work. The best dessert.
The best what?
The best dessert.
The best dessert. Whew. Ice cream.
What's your number one flavor?
I like coffee.
Yeah, right on. I mean, we're all just chasing Haagen-Dazs. My take only.
Yeah, I mean, like I love fancy. I love every dessert, but like I don't know, just something sitting back with a pint of coffee, ice cream, watching a shitty movie. It's nothing better.
A restaurant you wish you could bring back from the dead.
Oh my God, there's so many. I used to love though, and it was really a revolutionary restaurant. Will test people's knowledge, if anyone. I'm not even going to say anything about it, but there's a restaurant called Quilty's in New York, and you either know it or you don't. But it was legendary.
The only follow up is any relationship to quilted giraffe.
No, not at all.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole later and do your homework. Quilty's it is. All right, this is a big one. Your favorite cookbook of all time.
I remember when I was younger, there was a cookbook by Ken Hom, who is a British Chinese chef. And he published one of the first, like, really upscale, like, widespread Chinese cookbooks. And I just remember when I was younger, like, cooking from that a lot and learning from it a lot. Because there's, at the time, all the really nice cookbooks were all French. And he was the first one that did something that was Asian, that was
Very
like
cool.
really substantial.
I know the name. I'll check out this book. I haven't picked it up. Last one, your favorite sandwich.
My favorite sandwich, pastrami.
Is there a place?
Nothing else though. No other. No, like if you have really like a Katz's kind of pastrami. If it's really good pastrami, or you go to like Shapiro's in Indianapolis, you really get just mustard, rye bread and pastrami. You don't need all that pickles or Russian dressing or anything. Just like really good pastrami.
So agree. I think it's like either Langer's or Katz's. Those are my two.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, Edward Lee, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
Aliza, you are back from your incredible month in Asia. I just felt like we should catch up because we've been on Zoom a few times, but I haven't seen you. It's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too. We've been talking over Slack at strange hours of the day when we both happen to be online. But no, I'm back in New York. I'm back in the podcast studio.
What's so just coming back to New York, you're in Taiwan and Thailand. We're gonna chit chat a little bit about it here, but then you're doing a full conversation with your girlfriend Shirley, and you're gonna go over a lot of the spots and link to them, and it's gonna be amazing. But what's it been like coming back to New York?
It's pretty weird. I was saying this when I walked in, talking with our producer Clayton, but I feel like this is definitely about to be the most talking I've done with anybody who's not my girlfriend in the past month, probably.
Yeah.
Or at least speaking in English, which is the language that I speak
Yeah.
the best. Although I did learn a lot more Mandarin, so that was really fun. And specifically how to say things in like a Taiwanese way, which is really fun to get to learn how to do. But no, where I walked into Midtown today and I saw all of the coffee carts and the halal trucks, and I was like, okay, I'm back. I'm accepting it. I love these things about New York. So it's been nice to be back. I've been doing a couple like New York-y things, but mostly just adjusting to the time and cooking because I haven't cooked in a long time.
Right. You haven't been in your home kitchen. I'm sure that you missed it, right? I mean,
yeah, I feel like cooking is such a huge form of I guess self-care for me. It's just an outlet, and it's something that really centers me and is creative. I'm sure you feel that way too.
I do.
So getting back into that, I think, was a really nice way to kind of reorient my body in this routine I have of being back in New York. But some things like the weather or my schedule or the subway here, I think, are more of an adjustment.
Well, I've missed you, first off. So
I missed you too.
It's nice to see you in person. And I've been doing some monopods, which,
You're talking to yourself?
Yeah, mileage may vary with that listener, but I've been trying. I like having you here, though, so we can bounce off ideas and record 3 things and just do our interviews here. I want to know a little bit just broadly, what was your takeaway broadly about just being in Taiwan?
I mean, I really loved it there. It was special for me because I was going with my girlfriend, Shirley, whose family is all in Taiwan mostly. And I got to meet a lot of her family for the first time and also just get to see this other part of her life and the way that she can exist in the world and eat all of these foods that I've been looking at and wanting to try for a long time. But I feel like just the Taiwanese people are really kind and also really chill. I feel like there is this sense of certainly things are orderly and the subway runs on time and is like beautiful lines that people line up in. And then they play like a different classical music song when the subway arrives.
Just if we could have that in New York. Just classical music in general.
Right. I mean,
somewhere.
I love it when you hear a subway performer playing, but just the experience of like waiting for the subway and having it be so calm and orderly and kind of thoughtful as well. Like there were things like that just felt so completely different. But even that sense of kind of order, like I didn't feel like it felt uptight in any kind of way. It felt like people being respectful for each other and looking out for each other. And there were so many little moments like that I found to be really meaningful. And then also the food obviously was so fantastic and the quality of seafood and shellfish because Taiwan is an island or the fruits that I got to have there that I never had before. And I felt that way about getting to go to Thailand a lot as well and just experiencing like so much of the way that people exist in social spaces together, all of that stuff.
A month in Asia, a month plus. I mean, when you're...
Less than a month, 3.5 weeks.
3.5 weeks, okay. Well, it's longer than most trips. I've never been there that long. Was there something about the way food was prepared or just your own diet that it struck you upon reflection about the way, things are maybe slightly different from your usual day-to-days?
Yeah, the food is very inexpensive in both of those places, especially in Taiwan. And because of that, like people make up for it in the speed in which it can be served to people at a lot of places. So there's a lot of stuff where things have been already prepped ahead of time and then they're just frying it off, like putting it in the broth, assembling it. And especially if you're eating at one of the more like casual, like on the sidewalk or like a little restaurant, like a lot of the places we would go to, they just have it done that way. But it's still so affordable and it's really fresh. And I think especially like a lot of Taiwanese, like more home style or traditional cooking that we were having is about having these high quality ingredients and not necessarily doing as much with it versus in Thailand, you have these really elaborate curries and pastes and salad dressings. And there's kind of so much more going on there from a ingredients perspective. So I feel like comparing that was really nice. Also, I feel like a lot of people know that I love fruit and getting to go to all the fruit stands. And I had a wax apple for the first time.
Explain.
Have you had those?
In Korea, yes, I've had a wax apple. I can't recall. I know I've had it, but what's the texture like?
This is my new favorite fruit. I've eaten it so many times over the past couple weeks. The texture is the best part. I would say it's as juicy as like a very good apple or an Asian pear, but the texture is much lighter and less dense than those fruits. It's almost cottony or like little like tufts inside of it when you bite in it. And it's really crisp on the outside. And the flavor is maybe like, I had a hard time. If anyone could describe it to me, I would love to know what other people would say. But maybe like a green grape or a plum that has that kind of tart, sweet, almost
Mhm.
like herbaceous note.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the shape of the palm of your hand, and it looks like a bell kind of, or a bell pepper. I really love those. I wish we could have them here. I brought 3 on my flight back
Yeah.
and ate all of them and realized that I should have brought more.
Yeah. Or your next trip. Did you have any soursop?
I had soursop and I also had sugar sop.
Oh, wow.
I
No.
think the Taiwanese for that is sakya. I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but Taiwan is the largest grower of sugar sop in the world. It
Wow.
was brought over by the Dutch when they were colonizing prior to the
Yeah.
Japanese colonization, and it's grown very widely in the southern part of Taiwan where we were. So I'd never had one before. That was pretty cool.
Is there like a flavor or a scent that just is still with you from this trip? That
Stinky tofu.
Oh, you had some. Okay, cool.
No,
Cool.
I honestly did not have some
No?
because I really found the smell to be just a lot for me to
Yeah.
handle. I get migraines, and I really feel like the smell of stinky tofu felt like it was going to trigger a migraine for me. But when you're walking around, especially in Taipei, there's a lot of places that are doing braising, and you can choose from a bunch of ingredients what you want braised right then
Oh.
and there. And stinky tofu is really common. And so we would be walking down the street, and Shirley would say, "Stinky tofu, like cover your nose." But
Yeah.
once you smell it, like it's kind of too late, you know?
Yeah, it just like sits with you. Let me ask you, this is a little abstract, but like, is there like a flavor or a texture that you experience that you have? And I've had this experience many times in Asia, like a style of like an acidity that felt like I'd never had that in American cuisine or Korean American. Or, I mean, is there something that sticks out from you?
Mm, I think maybe a texture that I found myself experiencing a lot is this chewiness. You know, like QQ is a term for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Also, that very kind of squishy, chewy texture that a lot of people, I think, are drawn to in Taiwanese food. And then maybe a little slightly less chewy version of that, but boba is something I was having a lot of
Ooh.
when I was there. And I really love tea and oolong, and there's a lot of oolong that's grown in the mountains in Taiwan. And a lot of the boba places we went to that have those really beautiful, like top of the line, like tea espresso machines that you can put different single origin teas in. And then they have a whole array of other things that are going to go into that. Also, the coffee citrus or tea citrus combination is something I found myself loving and encountering so much. Both like the coffee tonic water with some grapefruit or kumquat or calamansi. It's something a lot of the coffee shops I went to were doing. And then also a lot of boba shops were doing black tea with like chunks of grapefruit.
Yeah.
I don't know what to call it. The flesh?
Like the pulp or the flesh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it would be like a grapefruit flavor, but when you would drink it, there would be like actual little membrane, like parts of grapefruit that you could be having. It just felt like so fresh.
I love that combination, and just thinking about the cafe culture in Taiwan, I've heard it's legendary. I mean, it's the quality of the teas, and I mean, what was the service like in the cafes? Was it like seated? You would order at the counter and have, or was it more like a quick,
I feel
plastic
like there's
cup?
a really cool range of kinds
Yeah.
of places we went to. Certainly, a lot of the boba places don't have a lot of seating at all. It's a counter that you step up to and order and then take it with you on your way. And lots of people have little like portable boba cup carriers. That's like a
That's
piece of fabric that wraps around it with a handle on top, which I immediately wanted and ended up actually, we'll talk about it in the episode, but Shirley and I went to a place called DIY that you can customize shirts or all kinds of things, but you can also customize your own little fabric boba carrier. And so once I had my own boba carrier, so I had my hands free and I could loop it around my wrist and walk around. I really
Oh.
felt like I was operating on another level. But those kinds of places I think are very quick versus there are a lot of really beautiful coffee shops that you can go and sit in. And especially in Tainan in the south, where we were at the end of the trip, there's a huge bar and coffee culture there. And it's down a lot of these beautiful old alleys and what used to be a former home. Maybe it has pieces of the old walls kind of sticking out and coming through. And then you could get it to go or you could dine in and get a pour over or a cortado or something like that.
amazing. I can't wait for that conversation with Shirley, and you'll have to share some specific places to go to, because
Yeah.
that will be a lot of value there. It'll be great.
We have already been talking about how we're going to structure the episode.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
a
yeah.
lot to talk about, but whatever we do, it will come with detailed show notes of things as well.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, let's move to Thailand, because I wanted to hear a little bit about your trip there. And your first time there, and how was the like this like street food, like the outdoor dining situation there? Because that's what I take away most from Thailand, is eating outside all the time.
Yeah, certainly the night markets,
Night
or
markets.
vendors that are on the street. I mean, everything is so delicious. I really love Thai food. That was kind of the whole reason for the trip,
Yeah.
was feeling like if we were going to be going to Taiwan to see Shirley's family, we were already going to be in Asia. We might as well make the most of being on the other side of the world and go somewhere else. And then we wanted it to be warm, and we wanted to eat a lot of Thai food. So it was kind of perfect in that way. And we went to Chiang Mai in the north. So we got to have some really good
Oh,
khao
cool!
soi.
I didn't know that you went to Chiang
Yeah,
Mai.
we went to Chiang Mai for like 3 days.
No way.
Ate a lot of khao soi, had some really good crispy pork noodles that a friend, Kelly of ours, recommended, whose family is from Chiang Mai. And so we kind of walked out of the city very far one day and had the most incredible kind of bowl of noodle soup. And then we went to Bangkok, which was also incredible. And I feel like a common theme maybe in Taiwan, but especially in Bangkok, which is such a like international global city, is that in addition to having really great Thai food, we were also able to have fantastic Japanese food. Their Chinatown is the biggest Chinatown in the world. They have the largest immigrant community of Chinese people outside of China. And we stayed in Chinatown for a couple days and had just really incredible kind of Thai Chinese fusion food.
Mm.
Also, the mall culture is super huge.
I recall this from years ago, having some mall fried chicken that was pretty great.
Yeah, I mean, there's like 10, maybe more, very gigantic popular malls across Bangkok, and a lot of them really established food vendors from Bangkok or from other parts of Thailand have a second location inside these malls. They're air conditioned, they're open very late, and so they're a huge part of the Thai experience is going to the mall with your family or going to go get some food, just because of the ease of being able to go there. And it's so cool to be somewhere where mall culture is so vibrant. I think in the US you always hear about mall culture is dead. Yeah, what mall? What mall do you go to?
Yeah.
But that's really awesome.
Yeah.
And so I enjoyed that as well. We went to 4 malls, but there were so many more that we didn't have time to go to. It is such a big city. It's kind of like LA in that kind of way that there's a lot of sprawl. And so getting across it is not the best. You kind of stick to one side.
What are the fit checks in the malls? What are people wearing in contemporary Bangkok right now? What's the style like?
The coolest outfits.
Yeah.
Everyone had just incredible baggy pants and bag charms. I don't have it with me. I got a Pom Pom Purin. Do you know who that is?
No.
He's like from the Hello Kitty universe.
Okay.
He's this little dog. I'll show you a photo. But in Thailand and in Taiwan, everyone has these little stuffed animals or charms like dangling off of their bags. And so I really felt like I needed to get one, and this little dog who's shaped like a pudding.
Oh, that's adorable.
I got him at 7-Eleven. Also, the 7-Eleven culture in Thailand and Taiwan is both fantastic. Just the amount of really good snacks or fresh food. In Taiwan at the 7-Eleven, you can get roasted Japanese sweet potatoes or soy marinated eggs instead of the hot dogs. Yeah, fried chicken you can get also.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think, and the variety of drinks too. Like
yes,
just getting
malted milk, apple milk, all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, the malted milks of Taiwan.
Yeah, I don't drink milk, so I didn't buy it, but I was excited to see it because I knew that that's not really something we have access to here.
I mean, I'll just close. Like, I know our listeners like to travel. We certainly we had a survey last year, and many people love to travel. And like, can you offer a recommendation of traveling to Taiwan? Just like in general, how would you do it? Just with this one trip in mind, like where you would start, and do you rent a car? Do you take the public transit?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for both Thailand and Taiwan, I think they're really amazing places to travel to. It's so easy to get around both Bangkok and Taipei. I think if you were going to travel to those two countries, I would focus on those cities just because there is really good transit opportunities. I had really good healthcare in both of those places provided to me, like much better than I would have gotten in the United States. The people in Thailand I think Bangkok has been such a big travel destination for so long, and it's such an international city. I heard so many people who were from Korea or Russia or Germany or Japan that were all speaking English as a common language with Thai people when traveling. And so I think as people who speak English in America, it's a really easy place to go to. And I think Taipei is super under the radar comparatively as a travel destination. I saw much fewer tourists when I was there, especially outside of Taipei in the south, in Tainan or Kaohsiung or Taichung, which we'll talk about on this episode, because I think all of those cities I went to are really special, and especially Taiwan is not that big of a country, so you can take the bullet train and be from one city to another on the other side of the country in 45 minutes, which is so awesome. I
That's
wish we
amazing.
could have that here in the U.S.
Yeah, wow.
And we really, did a lot of traveling around Lunar New Year when a lot of people are taking the bullet train to visit their family if they live in a different city. And just it makes it so easy to do that, which is really nice. So I would definitely recommend going to both of those cities. And I think once you're in Taipei, it's really so easy to get around. There's so many subways. They're all really clean and orderly, and you can hear the classical music, which I love so much.
Yeah.
And start there. And I think, I'm really happy to have Shirley come on the show. I've been speaking about her as somebody that I cook with and go to restaurants with for years. So maybe there's a listener out there who feels like they're getting a guest episode from someone that's been mentioned on the show before. But I think I'll get to speak with her more about just what we found to be meaningful and exciting when we were traveling there and some places we would recommend going to.
Well, I can't wait for the episode. Thanks for sharing. We're going to go off the mic now and talk about Severance because you're almost caught up and we have theories, but
we're going to chat.
Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
This is Taste is hosted by Aliza Abarbanel and me, Matt Rodbard. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things that are happening.